Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a world's finest collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself, in which we combine the forces of Stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about some comic book subject of Mike's choosing. Because I hoard my way into this event years ago, so he gets to pick what we talk about. And his choice today was partly inspired by his own BookTube event going on right now, Sumerian September, an event that he crafted in order to celebrate Robert E. Howard's greatest creation, Conan the Barbarian. Uh, Last year, Sumerian September's rough goal, if you wanted to have a goal, reading anything would for Conan related would be fine. But if you wanted to have a goal, it was to set aside the time every day to read all of the original work that Robert E. Howard wrote of Conan. It's a big book, but it's doable in a month. And this time around, it's to read Conan pastiche fiction. The main focus of the pastiche structure, if you want to use it, are the old adaptations, homages to Conan that were done by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. That paperback set, some of which had great Frank Frazetta covers, that really was the introduction of the character to a lot of people. But that's only very specifically, if you want, you can read any adaptation of any kind of Conan, any kind of pastiche at all. And Michael K. Vaughan is adapting that to our Epic Comic Book Wednesday for today by talking about one specific Conan comic book story. Not a run, not a particular creator, just one story. And the story, we're going to find it in this big hardcover volume. This is volume 2 of the complete Barry Windsor Smith archives of Conan the Barbarian. And we are finding it in the monthly comic Conan the Barbarian, number 16, with this Barry Windsor Smith cover. Night of the Frost Giants is what it was called in this comic book when you would pay your 20 cents to get this. The actual story is called The Frost Giant's Daughter. And the Conan the Barbarian, Night of the Frost Giants, or whatever you want to call the story, was not its first appearance. It first appeared in as a comic book in this adaptation, written by Roy Thomas and drawn by Barry Windsor Smith, in Savage Tales, a black and white magazine that Marvel put out, that Stan Lee wanted it to go to a more mature audience. He wanted to evade the comics code. He wanted to get it into a different part of the newsstand. And he succeeded, and that gave him a slightly bit more latitude as to what he could and couldn't show in a Conan comic book, which is this is a world and an intellectual property that will generally reward greater latitude when it comes to explicit content. When Conan tells some thief in an alleyway that they've picked the wrong person, you then want him to pull out his broadsword and bisect the person, and you can't show him doing that in a 4-color monthly comics code comic. You can show him doing that in a black and white magazine. So this story originally appeared in Savage Tales in black and white. But Savage Tales is for losers, and comics in black and white is also for losers. So I'm choosing to show you this volume, which adapts this particular story, The Frost Giant's Daughter, which Robert E. Howard never saw in print in his lifetime in the form in which he wrote it. He submitted it, and it was rejected. I don't know that I've ever read a definitive account of why it was rejected, but I think it's easy to tell. I think it probably made the editor queasy because there are 2 or 3 active elements in the story, The Frost Giant's Daughter. It's a really good story. It's one of the best Conan stories, I think. But there are 1 or 2 active elements in it, and one of those active elements, it's not in the forefront of the story, but you only have to think about it for a minute to realize, no, I don't want to print this. Robert E. Howard, he took the story back. Again, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of how he reacted to the rejection. It was not normal for him to have a story rejected. But he took the story back, he revised it, sent it somewhere else, and got accepted, and just sat on the original and never saw that in print in his lifetime. And it's a story of a very young Conan. I think Michael K. Vaughan would probably know better than I do, but I think this is probably one of the youngest Conans that we get, one of the earliest periods in Conan's life that we get in any Robert E. Howard story. He is fighting alongside a band of Northern warriors against another band, a different band of Northern warriors. And as the story opens, everyone's dead but the two of them. Him and one of his opponents. We get this great 2-page spread there. This book not only colorizes the original story, but enhances it. There's all sorts of shading, all sorts of enhancement of it's a beautifully done restored version. Not restored because it wasn't originally done in black and white. The palette choices here are lovely. Now this is, of course, Conan makes short work of his opponent, and this is Barry Windsor Smith at one particular stage in his artwork. It's almost it's almost to the point of his artwork that he soon gets to with confidence. I mean, he is granted a lot of leeway by Roy Thomas. He's granted a lot of leeway by Marvel Comics. He's granted a lot of forbearance for very slow work habits, and that allows his visual style to transform into its full effect, which when it starts out on Conan, it's not that. It's only in issues around now that we start to see what he can do if he's just allowed to blossom as an artist. So that we get, let me give you an example. We get a panel like this of Conan running in the snow. That isn't Jack Kirby, and it isn't really Steranko either. It isn't really any of his artistic forebears. It's starting to become more like him. But in this story, Conan wins against his opponent and then passes out in the cold, face down in the snow. And when he wakes up, he thinks he wakes up, the world is suddenly imbued with new colors and new brightness, and there's a young woman standing there. And she is scantily clad. Let's just put it that way. She is scantily clad. She knows who Conan is. He has no idea who she is, and he has no idea where she comes from. There must be a village nearby because she'd be freezing to death dressed like that. If not, he says that to her. I thought there was no village near this spot, but you cannot have come far over these snows dressed as you are. I might point out here that Conan has, and he doesn't have any more clothes on than she does, but you have to expect that. She allures him. But now, look on my golden tresses, my lips, these ice-pale lips. Am I now beautiful, oh man? I think that's a misprint. When she says that, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be, am I not beautiful? And this panel here is different in Savage Tales. In Savage Tales, you don't get tasteful blurring. You get actual Frost Giant's daughter boobies. They're very, very tame, but they are there. And Conan, notice, she looks like a department store mannequin. She looks like how you would draw a beautiful woman if you did not find women beautiful. Let's just put it that way. Whereas Conan looks like a real person. He looks like a 1970s version of an intense, handsome, big-haired young man. And he says, like dawn running naked on the snows, which is a lovely bit of poetry lifted from the story that is quite nice. Conan can occasionally do that. He can occasionally come out with a really neat observation about things or people. And she taunts him and runs off. She says, then why do you not rise and pursue me? Lie down and die in the snow with the other fools, Conan of the black hair. You cannot follow where I lead. And she runs, and he chases her across the snowy wastes. And well, they run and run and run, and you get the impression that of what might have bothered that original editor, because what is Conan going to do when he catches her? She's taunting him, sure, but what if she turns out not to be faster than he is? I honestly don't think that the question occurred to Robert E. Howard in anything like the way that it occurred to his editor. I think Robert E. Howard thought that what would follow would go under the euphemism that was common in fantasy fiction and pulp fiction at the time of the word ravish. We use a different RA word, but I think Robert E. Howard would just have thought, well, he's a big, heavy-thewed, mighty warrior. He will ravish the comely maiden. But he doesn't get a chance. At first, he doesn't get a chance because she has led him to a pass where these two giants are. They are her brothers. And it's clearly a ruse. She is clearly leading Conan to his destruction. She leads him to these two giants and says, we'll cut out his art and put it on the altar to our father, Ymir. Take his heart that we may lay it smoking on our father's table. Their father turns out to be, we never see him, but he turns out to be Ymir, who is a gigantic primordial frost giant from Norse mythology. Who actually creates the world, and his cow licks people into existence. His cow at Embla finds a nice salt lick and decides to lick it, and it forms people. Anyway, these two frost giants are wonderfully brutish under Barry Windsor Smith's handling, and they obviously aren't going to succeed. Conan eventually defeats them both and kills them both. It's odd the way Barry Windsor Smith, he is evolving in his artwork. When he starts off on Conan, he's doing Jack Kirby pastiche. And Kirby would not have drawn the fight like this. Look, we barely see the fight. It's off in the distance. And it's over before it begins. Kirby would have given 4 pages to it, and you would have felt that you'd been along for the ride. But no. No, Barry Windsor Smith is starting to value different things, do different things in his artwork. He kills both of them. And yells to the girl, "You cannot escape me." And there he is sliding down the snow. And if we pinch on this oh, right. Right. This is print and paper, which is also for losers. Well, all right. Let's fix that. This is Night of the Frost Giants. Here we go through the book. You're going to see here right away that this artwork has not been slightly enhanced by a computer. This is the way it more or less would have looked, except we still get the blurred out frost giant daughter boobies. But because this is not Savage Tales, I'm pretty sure that there are reprints where you can see that original panel, that original risque panel. But you notice in this original, it's not as dark as in that revised version for the hardcover. Here we have a bright red sky. Here we have this lovely detail there. It's not all gray like an Arctic landscape, which is, I imagine, what the restorer had in mind. And here we get Conan sliding through the snow, and that, again, is not anything that Jack Kirby would ever have done. It's not anything that Steranko or Gil Kane or anybody else would do. Notice the tiny little details there. This is starting to mutate into Barry Windsor Smith's real artwork, into his maturer form. And eventually, the impossible happens. Something that has never happened to this young woman before, we can guess. Conan catches her. And in a panic, she calls out. He is beginning to ravish her. And in a panic, she calls out to Ymir, her father, to save her. And a bolt of light strikes her and whisks her away, and Conan passes out again. And when he wakes up, the band of warriors, the remainder of the band of warriors that he was with, are reviving him from the snow and asking him what happened. And he's giving an explanation. I saw a woman, beautiful as frozen flame from hell. Didn't you find her tracks, or the 2 giants I slew? And the men say, only your tracks, Conan. And he says, then it may be that I am mad. And one of the warriors says, a man named Gorm says, no, you're not mad. This happened to me. Yes, old Gorm. I saw that girl myself once when wounded and lay howling a dying dog because I could not crawl after her. She lures men to be slain by her brothers, the fierce frost giants. You saw Atali. It is Atali you saw, stripling. Atali, the firstborn of Ymir. Atali, the frost giant's daughter. And the warriors dismiss him. They say Gorm's mind was touched in his youth. Conan followed a dream into the wastes, and Conan is maybe willing to agree with that, except that he still has her scarf. And that moment, the moment where we are wondering whether any of this happened or Conan was just dreaming in a stupor, that Miracle on 34th Street moment where he has the scarf as if to prove something, because where would it come from otherwise, is the wonderful little shiver of pulpy goodness that Robert E. Howard originally wanted for this story. That's what he wanted for this story. He wasn't thinking about the implied ethics or lack thereof, the implied horror of Conan chasing this girl and what he's going to do if he catches her. He wasn't thinking about the panels that we get so diplomatically done. He wasn't thinking about that. I don't think he was. I think he was thinking that the main point of this story was was it real or was it not? And in that sense, it dovetails really well with the way Robert E. Howard often does the supernatural in Conan, I think. I love this little taste of it. To my mind, this is a tightly controlled, neat little story, and that original editor should have had the courage of his convictions and run it the way Howard wrote it. Fortunately, we have the way Howard wrote it, and it has been adapted a number of times. Marvel Comics did it in Savage Tales, and then they reprinted it a million times in Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan, because fans loved it. Fans loved the story. They loved this adaptation, thought it was really well done. A couple of fans wrote in and said, is it my imagination, or is Barry Windsor Smith's artwork changing for the better? Starting to become his own instead of an homage to anybody else. Fans loved it. So Marvel has reprinted it a lot. But when Marvel lost the franchise to Conan the Barbarian, Dark Horse got the franchise, and they did a wonderful version of The Frost Giant's Daughter. I feel a little bit disloyal to say that it's better than this one, because I bought this one for 15 cents on the newsstand, and I was blown away by it. But the Dark Horse version is really, really good. Two excellent adaptations of this story. And now the Conan franchise has gone to Titan Books, and they are currently adapting The Frost Giant's Daughter, which is all of 10,000 words. It'll take you 15 minutes to read. They're adapting it in a multi-part series in which Atali has agency. And is a take charge girl boss who don't need no man, and has a backstory and thoughts and character, is not just a siren, just a mindless temptress. No, instead, it's her story. The Frost Giant's Daughter is her story in the Titan Books adaptation, which is, the first part of it is nothing less than absurd. It is, look, we have the franchise to Robert E. Howard's Conan, but we hate Robert E. Howard's Conan. We hate it. We not only hate it just personally on our own taste, but we think it's actually evil. Why you would bid for a franchise, if that's what you think of it, I don't know. But we have it, and we hate it. There's not a single stone of this that we are going to leave unchanged. And this is a perfect place to start, because you can't leave the story the way Robert E. Howard actually wrote it, obviously. If an original editor 100 years ago thought that, then certainly we think that now, in the enlightened age, when we all have Twitter accounts. So the story has been adapted many times. I'm going to tell myself that it's only been adapted twice. I am going to ignore what Titan Books is doing with it and just tell myself it's only been adapted twice. This Marvel Comics adaptation, the original of which I have in a box somewhere. I have Savage Tales #1 in a box somewhere. I wasn't going to, well, I saw it on the newsstand. I wasn't going to buy it, but I kept being struck by how weird the cover is, so I bought it. So I over the years, I bought this story many times in many different places and was happy to see the repetition every time. But I'm thinking about this adaptation, which is quite good, and also the Dark Horse adaptation, which is also quite good. I'm just thinking of those. I'm going to leave out any Conan comic book adaptations now being done. I'm just going to forget about them. But anyway, that's our epic comic book for today. It's The Frost Giant's Daughter by Robert E. Howard in a comic book form. And I think maybe, I haven't watched Mike's video yet, but we do Voxer about these things. And I think he might be willing to do another comic book adaptation next week for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Wouldn't that be fun? So I proposed one. There are a handful of Conan issues that I would propose. Heretically, they wouldn't all be Marvel. Dark Horse did some great Conan issues, just great. But even if they were all Marvel, oh my, oh my, there are a handful of candidates. There's a later issue called Sea Witch. Roy Thomas adapted it from a Robert E. Howard poem. Oh, it's great. It's terrific. Just a standalone issue. And there's, of course, Conan the Barbarian #4, The Tower of the Elephant. But plenty of choices. What we come down on next week. And I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you then. Thank you.